And welcome to the Canes Corner podcast, our first post-NHL draft edition. I'm Adam Gold. You see on your screen right there, Matthew Summa, who is now, congratulations first before we even start, the director of scouting for the, I have no chance to get this right, the Coquitlam Express. Did I get that correct?
Yeah, pretty close.
I
think there's emphasis on the Coquitlam, but yeah, it's spot on.
Oh, Coquitlam. Oh, we don't like that. We want everybody to compete all the time. All right, before we get into some things, I just want to set up what we're going to do here. This will, other than maybe getting an opinion, not going to deal with any potential trade of Brett Pesce. This makes me sad. I hope to not cry during this. I have a particular fondness for Brett Pesce. It would be better, of course, if he just if the Hurricanes and Pesce could come to an agreement on a contract. We're not going to talk about, or at least get into any detail on some other big club personnel matters other than who we might see among the young players stepping forward and getting into this. And we're not going to get into any other issues really with the big club. This is really about the draft and kind of using Matt's expertise with prospects, because everybody knows I don't have it. We'll kind of see what we can see about the future. I will say this before we get into the this draft and all the Russians. Oh my gosh, yeah. five Russians this year, 4 last year. I know the Hurricanes, and Matt, we can start the conversation here. The Hurricanes have a particular philosophy about what they are looking for in the draft. And if you, for instance, follow Scott Wheeler from The Athletic, he can't love Carolina's drafts enough. I think he wrote yesterday that I should just reprint what I wrote last year. Boy, do I love everything about this draft. They think about the draft the same way I do. And I know they have it's sort of like a sales view of it, safety in numbers, that everything's a risk. There are no sure things. So the more kicks at the can you get, the better chance you have of some of these guys sticking. But before we get into this draft, this is the fifth one of the Tom Dundon era, not counting I guess it is. Is it the fifth or sixth draft? Sixth draft, because sixth draft. So they've had exactly 4 players make the NHL in their draft. One of them is Andrei Svechnikov, who was the second pick, was a no-brainer. But is that a sign that maybe a different strategy needs to be employed, or was there's always a long game strategy? Because we really haven't seen very many players rise through the prospect rankings to the NHL. Again, Svechnikov, Drury came out of the same draft, Kochetkov, and I think I'm forgetting one more, but I don't think it's anybody who's played a significant number of games. So your thoughts on that?
Oh, Jarvis,
that guy.
I was trying to think of it too. Don't worry.
Woo!
Yeah.
And we love Seth. So
of course, yeah.
No complaints.
I think with the Hurricanes draft strategy, it's you take the home run swings. Sorry, my cats are fighting in the background.
Uh-oh. Hey, the octagon. We need an octagon. My dogs are inside. Yeah.
So we have the Hurricanes have a strategy of taking those big home run swings, right? The guys that, have the top of the lineup upside. And, there's always going to be risk with those players. But once you get past a certain point in the draft, there's a risk for every player. I mean, I'd argue after pick 5, there's no real sure thing.
Okay.
So with the Hurricanes, I look at it this way, I'll use it in examples Canes fans can understand. Some teams may take the player that has the ceiling of a guy like the Jordan Martinook, for example. And the Canes might take a guy whose ceiling is, well, if he hits, he's going to be like a, Seth Jarvis, or, Martin Necas is a good example, guys like that. And, would you rather have the Martin Necas level upside player, the guy that can hit 70 points, or would you rather have, the guy that might give you 30? Like, you're going to take the guy that plays top 6 minutes.
Yep.
Now, granted, you might argue that, well, the player has the lower floor or the higher floor or whatever. That doesn't really happen. Most of the players that get drafted with a high floor have the same bust rate as guys that have, the really high ceilings. So you can fill the bottom of your lineup with players like that you can find in free agency. Fourth line players and third pairing defensemen are a dime a dozen.
Yep.
Might as well take the home run swings, and that's what they've done. I mean, with their first round picks, you think about it. Jarvis played on the top line. Svechnikov and Necas are obviously top line players. I know Necas was a Ron Francis pick, but still.
Yeah.
And then you've got Kochetkov, who hopefully you're hoping is a starter. So you've taken those swings, and it's filled out the top of your lineup, which I think is important.
All right, let's get into this draft. And again, you can see his name right there. Matthew. Sorry, would you prefer Matthew? It doesn't matter.
Either way.
Matthew Soma from the Coquitlam Express in the British Columbia Hockey League. And that's where we start with Bradley, who left out the E for effect. I don't know. Nadeau, I made the joke. I've been waiting for Nadeau. It's terrible. It's a terrible joke. I have another bad joke coming with the second pick. But, man, again, you'll have a greater expertise than I would. But I don't even care what level he's playing at. The dude scored 113 points in 54 games for Pennington. So, or whatever I just said. And 35 more in the playoffs this year in 17 games with 17 goals. So I'm not really sure if you can really slam that pick at all, especially number 30 in the draft. But this kid looks like he's got an elite shot. So what do you know about him? What can you tell us?
He's a great player, and he's the type of guy that the Hurricanes have been drawn to. The really smart, cerebral players with, the high-end hockey sense. The skill is obviously an added bonus, but you can't teach the mental side of the game. You can't. There's something to be said about a player that just already knows what to do as soon as he steps onto the ice. That's huge. And the Vs are a team that is going to be at the top of the BCHL every year. That's just how they are. That's how they operate. They're a team like the Chicago Wolves of the AHL. They always want to be the best. And the fact that they had a 17-year-old kid get into the top of their lineup and dominate in the way he did is just impressive. And he's the BCHL's player of the year. He's the playoff MVP, just ridiculous accolades. Had an 11-game point streak this year, or a multi-point streak. Sorry. That's even more impressive. Like 11 games in the BCHL, you're kind of like, okay, well, what else can you do? But no, 11 straight games with a multi-point effort is incredible. Only getting held scoreless in 5 regular season games is also ridiculous. Just this is a kid that can play at the top of the lineup. I like the fact that he's going to a smaller hockey school like Maine.
Yep.
Maine has done a really good job of recruiting. They brought in Arizona Coyotes prospect Artem Duda from Russia, which is crazy to think that they're getting a kid that played, I think 30 games in the KHL this past year.
Wow.
So this is a team that could be on the upswing. They've got a new staff up there, and he's going to be a top player on that team pretty much immediately. And the fact that he's playing with his brother, who he's already had some success with, I think that's really good too.
Yeah, look, I think U.S. college hockey is becoming a very popular place to go and play. It doesn't have to necessarily be Canadian juniors. You can go to U.S. colleges, and frankly, the Hurricanes have plenty of players who played a lot at the collegiate level. I mentioned Brett Pesce at the beginning of this. He was at the University of New Hampshire Jacob Slavin, another guy who maybe next year we'll have another conversation on a podcast about a potential contract extension for Jacob Slavin. Wonder if he's paying attention to this one. I bet that he is. Right. First of all, can any of Carolina's, before we get into some of the other guys, are these guys all wingers, or does anybody have the ability to play center?
I was having this conversation the other day. I think Rod has he has a say in it. He picks these guys that can play centers and at least take faceoffs.
Okay.
Because you look at the Hurricanes roster, how many of our wingers can still take a faceoff? You've got Ignatius, you've got Martinook, Foss, Steven. Those are all guys that can take faceoffs. Yeah, so I think the fact that you're drafting a player that has played center previously, they may never be a true center, but if they can at least take a faceoff, I think that stands out to a coach like Rod.
All right. Well, let's get into some of the other guys, and here comes the second bad joke. Felix Unger Sorum, who I look at with, say, Bradley Nadeau. That's an odd couple. Again, that's a joke for people who are even older than me, probably. And I was a little disappointed they didn't take anybody named Oscar Madison in the draft later on. So this is a kid that played in Sweden for a junior team in Sweden, and I think their systems are obviously a little bit different than what we have here. I think the junior teams are all attached to the senior teams. So what do we know about Felix Unger Sorum?
What stands out to me is the fact that, he was over a point per game player with only 10 goals. Like, this is a kid that is an elite playmaker. Obviously you'd like to see the goal scoring maybe go up a tick, but again, you look at what he's done. He checks a lot of boxes for the Canes. He's smart, really good playmaker, good head on his shoulders. I think he does well along the boards for a guy that might be a little smaller than, a typical player. Right. But with Unger Sorum, you're hoping that he can be almost like a Teuvo Teravainen type, where he brings you, he may not be like a burner when it comes to skating, but he brings you, some reliable playmaking, penalty killing, stuff like that.
All right. Because I do want to leave time to talk about the prospects that Carolina currently has in the pipeline that we expect to at least challenge for a roster spot, whether it's this summer or next summer. I'm just going to leave it open at 5 Russians. Basically, there's also a type that Carolina drafts, and it seems like most of this draft class is under 6 foot. Whether that matters or not, I know I have spoken with Tom Dundon, and he says it doesn't matter at all, yet I keep hearing at the trade deadline, well, we'd like to add a little size. So I don't know, maybe draft it, but again, I'm not the expert in that. So who else from this draft class, if you want to run through a couple of names of guys that really stand out to you, that maybe they got value on?
Jaden Perron is a player that, some people were mocking in the late first round. I didn't necessarily believe it, again, because of the size. I think he's 5'9", 165 pounds. And I think he's a winger.
Big scorer, right, in the for the Chicago Steel?
Yeah, and he's going to North Dakota, which was another trend. We grabbed 2 kids that are going to North Dakota next year. So that's going to be kind of appointment viewing for Canes fans if you can find, a way to watch North Dakota. Jackson Blake, who's there already. I know Canes assistant GM Darren York has raved about him before. This is a kid that is just so much fun to watch when he's got the puck. And I think Perron is kind of the same way. He's electrifying with the puck. He can make a lot of plays happen. It's just a matter of, how can a player that size maybe adjust his game at the NHL level. College is going to be a big thing for him, where he can start playing against competition that's a little older. And he's another Canadian kid, actually, that's decided to go the college route. And I think that's, again, it speaks to how much college hockey has grown. The other player I look at in this draft that maybe isn't getting a ton of attention is the fact that, the Canes drafted, again, 2 goalies. Yeah. 2 Russian goalies, too. And with the thing with Russian players in the CBA is you don't have a timeline to sign them. So Ruslan Kazayev and Yegor Velmakin, they all have a chance, and you're going to have basically, however long you want to let these kids just cook in the Russian leagues before bringing them over.
Yeah, and I mean, there are a lot of good Russian goalies in the NHL, man. And Carolina hopefully has one of them in Pyotr Kochetkov. Also, they went to Quinnipiac. They signed the goalie as a free agent after this past college season, Yanni Peretz, who had incredible numbers. I don't know if he's really a prospect. I can ask you about that. You could throw in a comment about him. But Charles Alexis Legault, a defenseman, and I know the head coach there is a big fan.
Yeah, and obviously there's a bit of a Canes connection with Skylar Brindamore. Obviously winning the championship there. I think with Legault, you're hoping that he can continue to be a productive defender and kind of play, I call it the modern style where, he may not bring some offense, but you think of like a Brett Pesce type where he's a good skater. He can, seal off plays along the boards and just provide you some reliable defense, maybe not in a top 4 capacity, because that's not really what you're drafting for with a defenseman in the 5th round, but maybe in like a third pairing role. And then with Peretz, hey, I mean, the numbers don't lie. He's been a great goalie pretty much everywhere he's gone. He's another BCHL kid. But you also look, he's probably going to take a couple years because there is a pretty sizable jump between the NCAA and the NHL, especially for a goalie.
No question. We saw that when Jack LaFontaine had to play, as good as he was at the University of Minnesota. And I don't think he was as good in the year where they pried him out because Carolina had to have a goalie. They basically bought the rest of his senior year or however many senior years it was, because he played college hockey for so long. But you could tell the speed difference. But I think Peretz's numbers, his save percentage numbers at Quinnipiac far exceeded what Jack LaFontaine had at the University of Minnesota, at least on a consistent basis. So I guess and he's not exactly a big guy, so he does it with some quickness and some athleticism. So I'm a little encouraged in that regard. All right, let me get to some Hurricanes prospects that I look at what they want. Stahl is back. I think they're going to make every effort, and I think they'll be successful in retaining Jesper Fast. Barring a major trade that takes players out of their top 9, there aren't many spots left to fill with young players. So let me run them down, and you give me your thoughts on these guys and where they might fit, and give me a ceiling as well. Let's start with Alexei Ponomarev.
Yeah, Vasily Ponomarev.
Vasily. You mean all Russians are not named Alexei?
I made a joke yesterday that if you I couldn't remember Alexander Rykov when I was talking with my wife, and I said, well, his first name's Alexander and I know his last name ends in Ov, so that's 60% right there.
Right.
Vasily Ponomarev is a really good kid, and I think this is another player that Brindamore is going to love. The work ethic's outstanding. I could see him fitting on the 4th line. I think because if you look at the Canes' 4th line last year, what stood out to you? Because to me, what stood out was how slow that 4th line was.
Right.
Stepan and Stasny obviously have had great careers, but those players are not the players they used to be, and they had definitely lost more than just a step. They were a couple steps slower. So Ponomarev brings some speed, some grit. I think eventually you could have him in a role maybe like a Jesper Fast, just with a bit more offense, because I think his offensive skill is underrated. He's a player that's really smart, and I could see him moving up in the lineup if Rod needs to move him up.
Is Jamison Reese like a new version of Chad LaRose?
That's exactly the comparison I was going to use. He is a pain to play against.
Yeah.
Watch any clip of Jamison Reese and you'll see him getting cross-checked after every whistle because of either something he said or something he did.
Well, look. I don't know what their fourth line is going to look like this year. I mean, it might be Jack Drury's job to center that fourth line, or if Carolina goes out and gets a legitimate number 2 center. I don't believe. Yes, this is my editorial comment. I don't believe Jesperi Kotkaniemi is quite there at to be a number 2 center on a team that wins a Stanley Cup, barring a big leap forward this year. But I could see Kotkaniemi playing in that role, although a much more expanded fourth line center role. And Kotkaniemi centering 2 young guys with a little bit of skill. And that would be the advantage that Carolina hadn't been able to take it really, translate into scoring for them. I thought the fourth line this year was dynamite. It just didn't score enough. And maybe because they didn't have great speed. Where are we with Ryan Suzuki?
Man, Suzuki's had such brutal luck.
Yeah.
I don't think he's had a fully healthy season since he was drafted. Obviously, there was the COVID year, so we can't really count that because I think the AHL played maybe 20 games.
Right. The eye injury.
Yeah. There's the eye injuries draft year. He's had lower body injuries each of the past 2 years. Defensively, I think he's ready to play in the NHL. He makes a lot of really smart plays in his own zone, and I think that's something that we were worried about, or not we, the public scouting sphere was worried about when he was drafted, is how is he really going to play if he's a one-dimensional center, and that hasn't been the case. Now the question is, can he get to the middle of the ice as a center, or is he going to be a perimeter player? And I think if he can get to the center of the ice this year on a more consistent basis, he's more likely to be an NHL player than not.
All right, let me before I get to the 2 real prospects defensively, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe even that is being unfair to a couple of other guys. Is there another forward in the system that you think has a legit chance to either make the team or impact the team down the road?
Down the road, I'm going to shout out a former Coquitlam Express in Massimo Rizzo.
Okay.
This is a kid, I mean, he was drafted second to last in the draft, and you wouldn't be able to tell based on watching him play. Won a national championship his first year, and this kid, again, in the same boat, a similar boat as the guys we talked about in the Bradley Nadeau, Unger Sorum. He's an undersized forward, but with how he plays, he is so smart and so skilled with the puck. This is a kid that, if he makes it to the league, could be a top 9 forward.
All right. Well, that's always nice. But actually, it's a pretty good name. It's comparable to Cruz Lucius.
Yeah, again, a contender for top name in the system.
Yeah, incredible stuff. All right, on the blue line, and then we will let Matt Soma go. I asked a friend of mine who was actually playing with the Chicago Wolves last year, give me somebody who you think is going to be an NHL player. First player he gave me was Anthony Honka. I'm not vouching for this person's scouting skills, but I am asking you, what is his future?
Given the lack of a solution on the second power play right now, why not?
He's that good offensively?
Yeah, he was great offensively this year, and I think he defended a lot better on the smaller North American ice. There's less space on the North American ice,
right.
And so Honka, with his skating ability, is able to close gaps a little quicker. That wasn't the case in Finland, and he got turnstiled a lot in that league.
Well, we're used to seeing that. What about, was it maybe this is an Alexei Himusalmi, who, I mean, I looked at his numbers again. I don't think he had a great year statistically, but that doesn't mean he's not still a great prospect.
He's a good prospect. He's just playing on a team that refuses to put the puck in the net.
Oh, okay.
Assat has been a very poor offensive team See, I've been watching them since 2018 when we drafted Lenny Keelinen,
Okay.
and who obviously did not sign with the Hurricanes, I think this past summer. But they just haven't been a team that's consistently been able to score. Himasalmi's great offensively. I think he doesn't get as much credit defensively as he might deserve, but I would hesitate to put him in the top 5 of our current defensive prospects just because of a couple names at the top.
All right. Now, these two names at the top are coming here, and I know the team is very excited about their futures. So let's start with Scott Morrow, who is still playing in college. I think he's at UMass, right? Isn't he where Cale Makar
Yes.
came out of? Well, I don't know if he's anything. If he plays that way, I'm not comparing him to Cale Makar, but I know the team's still high on his future. He's a left side defenseman, right? He's a left shot.
He's a right-handed defenseman, but plays on the left side for UMass.
Okay.
So I'm not entirely sure. I'd have to look at what the rationale is for that. But I'm not going to doubt Greg Carville, the head coach at UMass. He's had some really good results. With Morrow, I think the key is just going to be patience. I mean, he's going to have some growing pains defensively, but offensively and with the way he carries the puck, there's no doubt in my mind that will translate.
And Nikishin, the kid from Russia, who's still 2 years away from coming over, but they believe could play in the top 4 even today.
Yeah, I strongly believe that too. And that makes me excited because he's 21 years old right now. I think he'll be 22 in October. And think about 2 years from now, if he's already a potential top 4 guy, what's he going to look like 2 years from now? This is a guy that had 55 points in 65 games last year as a defenseman. Those point totals are inflated a lot by the power play. And I mean, he's basically feeding one-timers to Dmitry Yaskin, who is a noted goal scorer in the KHL.
Right.
But physically, mentally, and with the way he skates, there's no doubt in my mind this kid's an NHL player. I think he has top pairing potential. And I mean, look, the kid's nickname is Boom. I think that's fantastic. Watch him hit people is just phenomenal. He's not just a physical defenseman, though, and I think that's where people get hung up and that they think, oh, well, he's just a physical defenseman. He'll be on the third pair. No, there's a lot more to like about this kid.
All right. Before I let you go, and I appreciate your time, I've already gone over where I wanted to be. But that's par for the course for me.
Look, I talk too much. I get it.
No. Like I said, man, I have no idea who any of these people are. If they were sitting next to me, I wouldn't know who they were. Because you had mentioned you wouldn't put Himasalmi in the top 5 prospects on the blue line. Well, I only mentioned 3 others. So give me 2 other prospects defensively who might be able to impact the Hurricanes at some level going forward. And do we anticipate any of them being available or ready to step into the lineup now?
Yeah, I think we have, obviously I'd put Nikishin number 1, Morrow number 2. I would say Honka's 3. I would put Dom Fensori number 4. I think he's a player that,
what a skater.
Yeah. And the work ethic is unbelievable. I remember this kid's first camp. He's going up against, I forget who it was, but they were about 6'5", and obviously he's 5'8" on a good day. And
with the wind.
He goes in, strips the guy of the puck, out-muscles him, and outworks it, takes it the other way. And I'm going, like, this kid's work ethic is outstanding.
Yeah.
And, I look at another player in the system who may not get as much credit, but I think Ronan Seeley had a really solid second half of the year. His first half of the year was rough. He maybe got pushed a little higher in the lineup because of injuries in Chicago when basically their whole roster got hurt. But the way he skates, the way he thinks, this is another player that I think could play NHL games. Himasalmi might have a higher ceiling, but with Seeley, I think there may be a better chance of him playing.
All right, final thing, and this is more broad brush about the Hurricanes system, which may or may not include these draft picks. It's clear that Nikishin and Morrow are future, at least in the minds of the scouts, future top 4 players on the blue line.
Yes.
How many other prospects in the system can you see playing in a top 6 as a forward or a top 4 as a defenseman?
For some of them, it just depends on their role. Like with Honka, the question with him is going to be, can you trust him with second pairing defensive minutes?
Right.
But Honka's a guy that if he gets on power play time and does well and can defend at least, at a reasonable level at the NHL level, maybe.
Okay.
Nadeau's a guy that I could see in the top 6 at his peak, like at his ceiling. If everything breaks right for this kid, if, the Hurricanes have a spot for him, that's a player that I could see playing in maybe the second line.
Okay.
But other than that, you're looking at middle of the lineup guys pretty much across the board.
All right. I appreciate your time, Matt Soma. First of all, congratulations on the gig, man. You're living out a dream, I know, for you. So that's awesome. So do you have to move now to BC or?
Not yet. Unfortunately, the junior hockey grind is one that, kind of has to be like a side project still.
Right.
Obviously, I'm dedicating a lot more time to it, which is why I've had to step away from the Canes prospects beat after this draft. But yeah, it's just a lot of video, hopefully a decent amount of travel, and just some fun tournaments. I love it. It's a lot of fun.
Like I said, man, you're living out your dream. I appreciate it. I'll be in touch at Matt Soma 12 on Twitter. Now at Canes Prospects is the responsibility of somebody else now, right?
Yes. I'm really excited. Nick Bass is going to be taking over the account. He's a really good kid. Somebody that's, kind of getting a start around the same time that I did. Okay. I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do.
Well, thank you again for your time. I appreciate it. And good luck in Coquitlam.
Thank you, Adam.
Hey, appreciate your time. And that'll do it for us here on this first post-draft edition of the Canes Corner podcast. I am Adam Gold. Thanks to Matt Soma. And we will see you next time.